Hey guys, what's up? It's NJ. Thanks for being here for the podcast. Leafs GM Kyle Dubis is wrapping up a Q&A with the Toronto media fronting a canceled practice. What is that all about? I have a few ideas. So does Mike Augello, and we know you do too. Thank you so much for sending your questions and concerns along to us. We are going to share them. Plus, we have some big news to share about the health and vitality of the Leafs Convo podcasts. We are leveling up big time. Mike's ready to go, I'm ready to go, and so are you. So what do you say? Let's pod. The Leafs Convo starts right now. And we've linked up with Mike Augello. Michael, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Norman. How are you?
Not too bad. What did you make of Kyle Dubis and his correspondence with the media?
Well, it was interesting because there were inklings yesterday regarding practice being canceled today. And apparently the reason that Dubis spoke was more about the fact that the media members had contacted the PHWA because, you know, they're entitled to speak to the players on a daily basis, you know, because they have to file stories and things of that nature. And because they weren't going to practice and the players weren't going to be available, then they made Dubis available. And I've only seen, I'm not up in Toronto today. I'll go up to practices occasionally, but from what came out of it, the most important information was Dubis relaying that they're working on an extension with Matthews and they'd like to get it done ASAP, which I think that means before the deadline, because they're looking at basically allocating and knowing where they are cap-wise so they can add players at the deadline. Apparently, they're not going to negotiate with Marner during the season. Him and his agent, Darren Ferris, basically said they don't want to negotiate during the year, and that's understandable. But Matthews is open to it, and they're talking with it. And I would think that they could get that done, and I would think based on his struggles lately, it's not going to be at the level of McDavid. It'll be below.
Yeah,
and that'll be a good thing long term for the Leafs.
He's not McDavid, so let's just reiterate that. And we don't want to trade Austin Matthews, Martin Marincin, and a bag of pucks for Connor McDavid.
I think the bag of pucks would be worth more than Martin Marincin, but that's just my personal opinion.
Let's get into some questions from Leafs converts, TLC OGs, and supporters of this podcast. At Pucker Up Toronto, a 100% female-run online publication focused on hockey. Amazing stuff. We want to help them out as much as we possibly can. Here's their question to you, Mike. Why do you think the Leafs have been playing down, so to speak, against teams with poor records? They tend to play well against the NHL powerhouses, but struggle in those so-called easy win games. What are your thoughts?
Well, I looked at who they played over this recent struggle at home, and it hasn't been easy opponents. I mean, the Islanders are first place in the Metro, and Boston is right on the heels of the Leafs, and they beat Vancouver, who was in a playoff spot. Nashville. I mean, Minnesota is fighting life or death with to get into the Western Conference wildcard race. But in general, their losses have come to teams that they should be on an equal footing with. And so I don't think they're not losing. You know, they lost to Florida. It's on the road, but you lose second of back-to-back games when your backup goaltender is in goal and you're not getting enough offense. But yeah, and then they showed up against the best team in the league. But I think that it's more like, you know, they haven't had a lot of easy games against easy opponents lately. What
was the game the other day against the Coyotes? And I think that's what Pucker Up is referencing.
Well,
yeah, starting to sound like one of the analytics guys. Everything's going to be fine and dandy.
But Arizona in the last 8 games in Toronto is 7-0-1. So there is obviously something when it comes to the Leafs playing the Coyotes in Toronto. That's not happenstance. That's a trend. So, I mean, and maybe they're taking them too lightly, but this is not something that it's just Babcock's problem. This is going back to, you know, Randy Carlyle, maybe even Ron Wilson. So there's something about the Coyotes coming to town and the Leafs taking them lightly, or them working themselves up into a lather to beat the Leafs. So I don't think it's simply the opposition and them not getting up for it. It's a multi-system failure right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's goaltending playing not as well as it did. It's the defense being as bad as it's been, and it's the forwards not scoring.
This team is immensely talented, but talent's only going to get you so far, Mike, and this team has to dig deeper than its talent right now to produce. Bob Smith, at Bob Smith 55, are the Leafs simply caving under the pressure of newfound expectations?
No, they've had these expectations since the beginning of the year. I think this is more reflective of the fact that the season gets more difficult at the halfway mark. The teams are hunkering down, and the Leafs, again, and I think Ray Ferraro said it brilliantly yesterday, their warts are showing. And it's like, you and I have talked about their defense ad nauseum, but it was camouflaged by great goaltending by Anderson and the power play and the scoring phenoms that they have. And once they come into a slump, and once Anderson plays a little more human instead of superhuman, the defense is exposed. So that's the whole point right now.
What I'm finding with a lot of Leaf fans and just sports fans in general, they don't want the truth. What they want is information tailored to their liking, Mike. Jarris Patterson, at Jarris CTV. If Austin Matthews continues to be in a goal-scoring slump and Mitch Marner continues to be the team's best player, will Mitch get the bigger contract?
No, he won't. Simply because he's a winger and Matthews is center. I think Matthews, like we just mentioned earlier, will get less than, there was, when he was scoring 20 goals in 20 games, everybody's saying he was going to get as much as McDavid. I think it'll be less than that, but not much less. But Marner, and this is the indication from that's been out there, and I wrote about this a couple months ago. It to me, it looks like the perfect fit is going to be Marner signing a shorter deal, probably 5 years, at around 9, maybe 9.5, under 10 million. And if that happens, it's perfect in the sense that he's going to be a UFA at 25 or 26. I think it's 26. But the next year, Tavares' contract is up. So the Leafs will be able to re-sign him for big money at that point, and they will only have a cap issue for a year.
We're already talking about the end of John Tavares' contract. It's insane. You're telling me Mitch Marner is going to be paid more than William Nylander, Mike? Are you kidding me? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll go out on a limb.
RJR at Plundra17. What DEFCON level will Leaf fans be at if Dubis decides deals are too expensive at the deadline and stands pat?
Well, I would say DEFCON 2, which is close to nuclear war if he does that, and DEFCON 1 if they lose in the first round. I think that Dubis will take heat and Babcock will take a lot of heat if they lose in the first round, and Dubis will take as much heat as Babcock if they don't go out and trade for the defenseman and then fall to Boston or whoever in the first round.
Forget about the October crisis. Look it up, folks. We're going to have the February crisis in Toronto and among Leafs fans, and especially the Leafs converts out there who are believing in what we're talking about if Kyle Dubis does not try to level this team up. Daver, at Daver_16. Would you rather play Boston first round or drop into a wild card and play Pitt, CBJ, or Wash?
Well, right now the first place team in the Metro is the New York Islanders. So would I rather play the New York Islanders than the Boston Bruins? Sure. But, eventually this team has to get by that Goliath known as the Boston Bruins. So, I mean, if they can't do it with Tavares and Matthews as 1-2 and with whatever Dubis does at the deadline, I mean, this is a roadblock that they have to break through. They cannot avoid it. Until the playoff setup changes, they're going to play Tampa or Boston or Montreal or one of these teams in the first round, and they've got to get through them.
I was going on about this team winning a Stanley Cup a few months ago, and we are a reflection of what the team is at any given moment because we podcast so often. I would love to see the Leafs win the Stanley Cup because people who follow this podcast and who know me personally and know me as a sports fan know that all I give an ish about is the Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. And that's fair. That's what we should be as fans. We all derive our own wants and needs and entertainment value from the things that we support. Mine at this point of my fandom, are solely focused on success and winning championships. With that said, if this team does not improve and William Nylander continues to do what he does, drive possession, but not do what a star player should be doing, and that's producing. Austin Matthews regresses a little bit, and Kyle Dubas wants to stand pat and manage his assets very conservatively, and this team gets his ass handed to it in the playoffs, it'll have it coming, and at the end of the day, it will have deserved its fate, Mike. From our YouTube community platform, Caleb Merkstrom, do you think if this Marner-Matthews pairing works, do you see it staying together? Because Babcock did this last year, and it was successful, but ultimately decided Matthews and Marner would be best on separate lines because they could run their own line.
I don't think this is going to last long. I think this is just a spark. It's just to, jumpstart Matthews. He thinks that Marner will, with his playmaking ability, and it's very possible, and they played together on the power play for most of the year. So shaking things up a little bit, and he's just searching for answers. But
sure.
Is this permanent? Not a chance. I think this will be maybe a game, and then maybe they come back from the All-Star break and everything goes back to normal. I think Babcock recognizes that the pairing of Tavares and Marner works. And if you have one pairing that works, you don't want to break that up for the sake of something else. So I think he wants to get Matthews jump-started and then return Marner to where he has been playing all year, which is with Tavares.
Michael Matthew, follow up to Caleb's question. If it doesn't work, the Marner-Matthews thing that you think will be for a good time, not a long time, what's next for Matthews and the team? And let me add to that. Reading on social media, a lot of reactions right now. Matthews not playing his best. Things were working out. The Nylander shows up. He tries to elevate Nylander. Things don't work in that regard. So it's Matthews not playing well. It's Nylander not playing well. Somehow this transcends their responsibility as professional hockey players who make millions of dollars and are supposed to be stars and is now placed squarely on the shoulders of the head coach, Mike. Because the team is not playing well right now, should we start brewing up a Babcock versus Matthews scenario?
No, I really, honestly, I think that's, I saw some Twitter speculation about Babcock being in trouble. It's the worst kind of bull crap that I've seen because it's not the case. Now, if they lose in the first round, you're going to hear some speculation, you're going to hear some criticism, and it'll be rightly so. He'll be at the halfway point of his 8-year contract, and he would have 3 first-round losses, but I'm not about to go down that road. And I think eventually Matthew, whether he plays with Kapanen or whether they put Nylander and him back together again, eventually he'll kick into gear. Remember his rookie season, he was really great at the beginning of the year. And in the middle of the year, I think he had a 12 or 13 game goalless streak. So this is not unprecedented when it comes to Austin Matthews or any other great scorer. He'll eventually get out of it. But I actually think that what needs to be done is they need a spark from the bottom lines. Kadri has not played great. But I think the worst thing is the fourth line is a complete and utter zero. You've got, bring up Trevor Moore. Give some of these younger guys. Now I know they don't want to burn entry level on some of them. Maybe go out and make a trade for a player who's a rental, but you cannot go into the playoffs with Par Lindholm and Freddie Gauthier as your 1-2 left wing and center on the fourth line. It just doesn't work.
It's not nonsense. My latest video on YouTube talks about how to give the Leafs a spark, how to inject some energy into the Leafs as they are right now without having to go out and make wholesale changes or make a trade for the sake of thwarting disaster. Mike, you know as well as I do that a team that's circling the toilet bowl doesn't necessarily respond to a trade. It makes things worse. You want to compound strength with strength. My idea, which is essentially our idea because you and I talk all the time about this kind of stuff, bring up Trevor Moore, and I threw out Calle Rosen as a guy who you might be able to elevate considering some of the things he's doing. He's got some good vibes attached to him right now. That would obviously require some finagling with the roster and injury reserve. So I don't know if that's possible, but Trevor Moore would be fantastic on that fourth line. When Tyler Ennis gets back, these guys are spark plugs, Mike. And if the top guys aren't doing what they need to do, and Mike Babcock is playing musical lines and musical positions with all of the guys who are typically supposed to produce, then let some of these cats at the bottom end who are making next to nothing compared to their superstar counterparts go out and show the superstars how it's done.
If it's possible for it to be stagnant, even though you're shaking up your lines every game, it has gotten that way. And honestly, you got Freddie Gauthier playing fourth line center, Lindholm playing out of position. He does not play well on the wing. He at the absolute worst, he should be moved back to center, and Gauthier should sit, or you send Gauthier down to the American Hockey League. I don't think he's going to get claimed unless somebody just needs a big body on their fourth line. But I'm surprised how much they miss the energy of Tyler Ennis on the fourth line.
Anything you can do to make this team better, do it. And when William Nylander's not playing well, or he looks like he's gassed, that's not Mike Babcock's fault. Remember who was talking up William Nylander towards the end of the impasse when we were getting down to the 11th hour and it was crunch time? It was Mike Babcock. William Nylander, he's who he is at this point. We know he can be so much better. But if he can't find his legs and he can't get his game going and actually produce points that help the team win, forget about driving possession. At some point, that has to turn the corner, and if it doesn't, you can't keep going back to it as reasons to say that he's functioning well as a superstar player who's getting paid that way too, right? It's not the head coach's fault. We just have to call a spade, and let's stop pointing fingers at someone else for your own problems. Before we go, I just wanted to pass along some information to our devoted listeners. Folks, it's official. Finally, our podcast project has a corporate sponsor. Vanguard Northeast Realty Corp in Toronto has decided to join the Leafs Convo as the title sponsor, our title sponsor. Amazing. Yeah, I'm very excited and great. It's great to have them on board. The Convo has worked really hard to develop a group of people listening regularly, and they've recognized that it's a great vehicle for advertising. So we're glad to have them join us. Leafs, Washington. We can't start thinking now that the Leafs need to play a team that's just as good or better than it, considering the Caps are the defending Stanley Cup champions, Mike. It's gone beyond that now, right? It's a game that's coming up, and let's just see what the Leafs do. Let's see if they can be better than their previous game. Well, I think it's going to be important. Obviously, they're going to have a long break. I think it's 8 days after tomorrow night's game, and what you're going to probably see is, the top players playing probably a little more than they normally would. Obviously, with the injury to Gardner, it's back spasms. He's probably not going to play. That means Dermott moves up to the second pairing, and he played well with Zaitsev against Arizona. So I think you're going to see Riley probably play 29 minutes, and they'll keep away from Marinson and Ozaganov as much as possible. And at forward, you'll see, I think, overusing of Matthews, Marner, Tavares, because they'll have, I know the Tavares and Matthews are going to go to the All-Star game, but, it's going to be a little bit of a vacation in a way too. So I think that desperation is here in terms of snapping the struggles at home, and they really have to do that. Otherwise, they go into the break with a bit of a bad taste in their mouth. And then, after coming back on February 1st, it's less than a little over 3 weeks before the deadline. And that's when the pressure on the organization and Kyle Dubis will begin. Bring it on. Michael, got to go. Thanks, Norman. That's a wrap for this episode. What do you think? Let me know inside the YouTube comments section or on Twitter at NormanJamesTLC. Thank you, hands emoji, blue heart to Hanan Goldfarb of Vanguard Northeast Realty Corp in Toronto. This is going to be a great partnership. We're not only in it to win it, we're going to crush it. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. The Leafs Convo is out.